Hello, and welcome to NISD EdChat, your regular look into some of the innovative projects going on within the district, and conversations with the educators who make them possible. I'm your host, Matt Freimeyer, and today we'll be talking about dynamic learning at a connected campus. We sat down with a few of the one-to-world educators at Rudder Middle School and had a roundtable discussion about the instructional innovations the campus provides its students, as well as the challenges associated with teaching outside the box.
I'm Deborah Copeland. I'm the English Language Arts coach at Rudder School, and I teach a 7th grade ELA class.
I am Nancy Castro, and I am the math instructional coach here, and I teach 8th grade math.
I'm Patricia Rogers. I'm the librarian at Rudder.
I'm Dr. Mary Jewell. I'm the principal at Rudder Middle School.
I'm Rebecca Munoz. I'm the 7th grade English Language Arts teacher.
I'm Janet Winninghoff, and I am the academic technology coach that supports Rudder.
The 21st century 4 C's, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creation, are a campus priority. What does that look like when you're planning? What are your students doing in the classroom when those things are happening?
Okay, when we started off with the 4 C's, I really thought that would be a good rubrics for us to kind of marry up against our lesson planning to see if we were really hitting those 21st century skills. I don't know that there was a directive to plan specifically for each 4C, but also kind of use that as a rubric to see if are we hitting the right rigor, or are we really having kids create, communicate, collaborate in their lesson planning.
For me, this means that the kids are creating their learning and becoming critical thinkers, so they're not regurgitating information that I'm giving to them and just giving an output. So the way that this looks in my classroom is we're doing authentic output. We're doing Google Sites. They're having to create them. They're having to collaborate. We've done a Google Hangouts because we're wanting them to know that the communication that they're doing is going to break the walls of the classrooms. They're reaching out to other classrooms. And the kids are really excited about this because they're not used to creating. It's not just a poster. It's not just a journal. It's something that creating with technology. So they really like it.
It's living and it's engaging, and the students are working outside the classroom and coming in before school without being told to come because they're so excited about what they're doing, and they're relying on each other more and more. And I hear them offering advice and asking for advice of each other and not relying on the teacher as the only person who is knowledgeable.
Exactly. And I keep getting these updates on their Google Sites that they're adding information on, and we're not giving these work assignments, but they're adding to it because they're proud of it. It's their accomplishment, their little baby.
And so the challenge for me in a support role is to try to make sure I'm matching students and teachers with the tools that'll help them accomplish these things, and then to make sure that the procedures that are in place in the library makes it a place where people are not restricted from doing these things, and trying to open up those doors rather than close them.
I think in my classroom or in our content area, that collaboration piece and that communication piece has not really always been there. The critical thinking, of course, we want them to think critically, to be able to do the math and apply the math, but getting them to communicate with the teacher and with each other and explain their thinking, that's been something that students have struggled with in math. When you would ask them how they would approach a problem or how they got this answer, they don't know because they haven't had that practice of communication. I think in the past, math has always been like more individualized, like you sit and you do the skills. And hopefully you can apply those skills, but having them work together on different strategies, different ways of communicating their math, I think has really brought up that level of critical thinking.
Speaking of a classroom in the past versus what we have right now and what we have in the future, what do you think, both your classroom and the classroom in general, what did that classroom look like 5 years ago? And what do you think it's going to look like 5 years from now?
Well, 5 years ago, everything was kind of cookie cutter. You know, we got 10 minutes for this and 15 minutes for this, and everyone's kind of working at the same pace. And yes, we were trying to do differentiation, but it wasn't quite like that. Technology, we didn't have a lot of technology, so we were doing things from the book and things in the writing and the journals, and everything was isolated. And now it's different, and it's going to be different 5 years from now because I want the students to own their own learning and to be creators and kind of take the lead in what we're doing. So maybe just providing parameters, but they're going to be owning their learning.
I like what you said about the learning being isolated. Like the teacher would teach and the kids would do in isolation. Very structured, very independent learning. And I think now it's more of that collaboration piece. Everybody's at different levels, so it's about us meeting the kids at their level and bringing them up. So what I would like to see 5 years from now is that more ownership of the kids being in charge of their own learning. What that is going to entail and how that's going to look, not really sure, but we are moving in that direction. And the more you see it, the more exciting it is, because then the kids are more authentically engaged, not just complying.
Well, kids are having a hard time with this transformation as well, because they come in and they want to say, what are we doing today? What are we learning today? And I said, I don't know, let's figure it out. And so we're trying to get it so that they're deciding how they're going to learn and what they're going to do. And some of the pre-P kids or the GT kids are like, well, how is this a grade? How are we going to be graded? And I'm like, don't worry about that right now. We're just learning right now. So.
And it's funny you say that, because GT kids figured out and mastered school, whereas, and they don't like the change necessarily. You would think they would be the ones that would jump in first, but honestly, they're the holdout.
How is this going to be
because
graded?
they want to make sure they're still going to get their 100 on their report cards. So
Yes.
that makes them extremely uncomfortable with the learning process, because they haven't really seen it from that lens based on their 8 years or 7 years of experience in school.
The last time I was in a classroom, I was very fortunate that we had a grant with technology, and it was early use of technology, but we had an interdisciplinary block. We had social studies and language arts together, which made so much sense because we did projects. So we used the technology. Somebody would be studying the Peloponnesian War, and they would interview soldiers from the Peloponnesian War, or they would be studying Greek plays and they would act out the plays or make puppet shows. And so the projects were great because I taught English language learners, and they could research in their language one, and then they'd create a word bank, and we'd do storyboards. It was very collaborative, very creative, and very engaging.
I can't see myself teaching a class without Chromebooks now. It would be so hard to go back and not have it. It would be really difficult for me.
When I think about my own classroom, like in the past, that 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was really teacher driven. And even the technology components, deciding the activities, it was a lot of teacher-led, teacher model. When I think about what's happening now and what's going in the future, it's about the kids doing the work, and the teacher is just supporting the kids as they need that.
I think, just to add one more thing, the kids having choice is very motivating for them, but then kind of scary at the same time, because they're like, what do you mean I can do this or this? And then giving them choices with technology and without technology. And gradually they're moving more towards the technology, but some of them still hold on to
The drawing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think that's the same thing for teachers too. So we got to change that mindset, and I guess change just what planning looks like, so we make opportunities for those kids to gradually make that change, and hopefully in 5 years it's going to be the norm. So.
And from an evaluative standpoint, I see a huge transformation. And part of it is because I get the luxury of seeing all the content areas and all the different teaching styles that are out there. And I see the teachers on a continuum of change, but it's all with a growth mindset, and the technology allows for some of those things to happen that otherwise may not have occurred. So it's kind of encouraging for me to see kids taking ownership of their learning and creating things and taking responsibility, which is a shift for them. And you're right, we have to train them on how to do that, and the teachers have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that's hard, but it's a good thing.
Well, you mentioned it yourself. Both the teachers and the kids seem to have, inside this new environment, have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. How do you do that? How do you yourself do that, and how do you get the kids ready for it?
It's definitely a scary process, because when we went to Houston for that Allen November seminar, we said that teachers are closet perfectionists. So we want to know, what are we doing Monday? What are we doing Tuesday? And having everything fit together. And so when we came back from that, immediately I tried to have students create questions, and we were feeling very uncomfortable. And I was even getting sweaty because it was like, I'm not in control. And so I told the kids, this is messy and it's okay. And they kind of just looked at me like, what do you mean it's messy? I was like, we don't know how this is going to end and it's okay. But like Dr. Jewell said, this is a growth mindset and we're always wanting the kids to take risk. We want the kids to go outside their comfort zones. And now that we have to do it, it's like, are we going to do it? Or are we going to still stick back to this is the questions, this is the answers? Or are we going to take risk and challenge ourselves as well? Which is hard.
Because when you think of your life outside of school, there are very few times when there's one right answer and it's due on Thursday, right? And so we all in real life, in our adult lives, have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
For me, it's like, how am I going to grade this? If everyone's doing different things and they're showing different types of learning, so now I'm like, does everything need to be graded? Or is it just the fact that they're learning? So I'm having to change the way that I feel, the way that I think about teaching and learning myself.
I think just demonstrating to the kids, like growth mindset applies to teachers as well. So when I try something new and it doesn't work, the kids are actually more forgiving because they're seeing like, oh, it's happening to the teacher, that I am not always in control of everything, and that's okay if I model that this is the way life works, and sometimes it goes my way and sometimes it doesn't go my way, and when it doesn't, what am I going to do now? What's plan B? And so they have become like very comfortable with that, and they're seeing me model what I want them to be able to do.
I'm having great moments of angst. I'm a very reflective teacher, and I'm really comfortable with messy, but there's this grade component, and there's this data with like, how are they going to do on STAR? And I have to have faith and trust because I've done this before, but I'm still having this angst, like, am I giving them everything? Can I make sure they have everything they need while they're doing this? But I know that skills in isolation without application is inert learning, and this is learning that they're receptive to because they're in the moment where they need that. But it still gives me so much angst as a reflective teacher. Rebecca and I
feel that too.
PJ and I have talked so much. Like, I want to be the best teacher I can be for these kids.
But I think giving them opportunities to go deeper, and we're pushing them to think critically, and so I think you get more bang for your buck that way because they're actually going deeper into that content than they were previously, where it's just more surface level, and we're moving along and we're keeping pace and we're checking the boxes. But now we're not sure what's going to happen, so we're not sure how much they are actually learning, but I think they're actually delving deeper into that content.
And you know,
more bang for your buck.
What you guys are describing is we're having to shift parent thinking, student thinking, and teacher thinking, especially in the grading component, because what does a grade mean and what does it represent? And how do we do standard-based grading to really understand the true mastery of their knowledge instead of just trying to get 2 grades in 6 weeks to meet district policies? And so I think y'all are innovators in the fact that we are trying to really get deep into the learning piece and away from all the compliance pieces, and the two systems do collide a little bit, and it's about getting better at those outcomes. And I think that's what maybe some of the discomfort comes from.
It makes me so uncomfortable, and Rebecca and I reflect oftentimes together, but it's reassuring to look at the research, to know this is working, because what we were doing before wasn't working. So I think we need that time to reassure each other that we're in this together, and we have so much support. Janet provides amazing support, but it's a game changer for everybody.
Lots of communication necessary for this to happen, which is one of the 4 C's, so it's good learning.
So as adults, we're also doing the 4 C's.
Yeah,
definitely.
We're having to do that.
Speaking of research, Casey Bell, author of Shake Up Learning, talks about changing static learning into dynamic learning. Just what does that mean to you?
Well, in stories, we have a static character, and then we've got the dynamic character, So what I connect this to is static never changes. It's the same thing. And dynamic is ongoing, and it's changing. And one thing that when I read Shake Up Learning that challenged me was we don't have to meet these hard deadlines. So it's like, this is due Friday, this is due Monday, hurry and do this. And instead, it's kind of like an ongoing process. And so with the Google Sites that I have right now, we're going to be doing unit reflections. And we've got these essential questions, and right now we're doing overcoming obstacles. And so the kids are going to be able to connect to that and reflect to that. And we're going to keep going back to the lessons, and so it isn't going to end. They're going to keep on going. So to me, that's what dynamic is: the change, that flexibility to go back. It's not one and done, and for the students to grow on that learning.
And the next unit, our essential question is really good. Can people really change?
Yes.
So this gives our opportunity for our Title I students to think, I can be successful at school. I can do school, because the GT kids, they do school.
Yes.
But these kids are going to learn to live the learning.
Going back to something that one of y'all said earlier, I think it was you. Rudder Middle School is a one-to-one campus. That means Chromebooks for every student. You talked about you couldn't really imagine teaching without the Chromebooks anymore.
I can't.
Before the Chromebooks, how comfortable were you innovating lessons, including digital learning, versus now?
It's kind of embarrassing to say, so the most innovative lessons that I think would be playing a video, having them talk about it, having them write about it, something like that. It wasn't recording, it wasn't creating, it wasn't video creation. So I'd have to say it was not a lot of innovative lessons, and I thought it was innovative, but not really.
One thing that technology does is it gives us access to unlimited information, and so as a teacher operating without that kind of one-to-one technology, you have to decide what you're going to provide to your students, and this opens it up to them to provide or to find their own resources. And then it changes our roles from the gatekeepers or the providers of information to facilitators who help students to understand and process the information that they're finding, and to think critically about all those things that they now have access to.
In math, we have those digital resources that the district has provided for us, but now we can actually access them and use them in the classroom. They don't have to be each student individually, but rather they can be in groups, but just to get them to understand the math, there's lots of different resources, but they can play with different variables and see how that changes the outcomes, and really get them to try to look for patterns, try to explain what's happening. We've had this idea this year about thinking like a mathematician, and so it's really tied in well with our technology, because I'm not telling them what's happening, they're actually seeing what's happening and then explaining it in their own words or talking about it within a group, that communication piece, and then they bounce those ideas off each other. So that has been a really big idea.
I can tell you from my lens, one of the concerns that teachers would bring to me about technology before we had every kid with one is they were afraid to put a lesson plan together that used a lot of technology for fear that either they wouldn't have the materials to do it, or something wouldn't work with the infrastructure, and so they were a little fearful of actually using it on a regular basis because they couldn't count on having those materials or the support that we needed to be able to run the technology that we needed to run on a daily basis. So I think that was kind of hampered or limited what they could do or felt like they could do in the classroom.
I feel like for me the biggest fear was off-task behavior.
Yeah.
Like for the kids to be doing something they're not supposed to be doing, but that's really been minimum. I haven't really had any kind of I really haven't. The kids really do well being on task and getting their stuff done.
I'll just walk over and close their screen, and that's it. They move on. I had a student this morning who came in for tutoring, and I teach a co-lab class with special education, and I said, wow, you have become such a writer. And this is a student who uses the voice to typing, because writing is a hard thing for him. He has problems with his motor skills. And he was listening to Sora. He was reading The Hobbit. This is not a book he would have chosen.
That's amazing.
But because of the technology, it's all accessible to him. And I said, you've become quite a writer. And he goes, well, that's because I get to pick what I want to write and read about.
That's awesome.
And that was just huge.
Well, that kind of leads into another question, help versus hindrance. Y'all kind of already talked about it. Like, how does it help or how does it hinder? But the real question is, how do you tell the difference? How do you tell, this is going to help, this is going to be, a roadblock for us?
Sometimes you don't know until you get there. these ideas are great in your mind, and then once you kind of push them out, you're like, oh wait, stop, and let's change it. So I don't always know what's going to happen.
We've had some of those days where, oh my gosh,
Pause.
that didn't work so much.
And that's normal. I just think the equity and access issue overcomes or oversees all of those other issues that they have. And I think they learn by doing, both teacher and student. And the parents have to learn to trust us in the new environment, which isn't how they were schooled as well.
There was a point where my seniors were writing, before I became a librarian, I taught high school seniors, and they were writing research papers, and we had Chromebooks, and we were conferencing online, and they were peer editing online. And at one point I kind of looked around and I thought, I don't think we've said a word in this classroom for a couple of weeks. And I realized it was time to probably reel that back a little bit and bring back in some face-to-face conversation. But it took, a couple of weeks of a really, really quiet classroom for that to sink in. And I thought, okay, probably we've done enough with this for now, and we need to bring back maybe some of the human element.
To wrap up, I just wanted to read this. If we are preparing students for the future, then we can't teach as we did in the past. Do you agree, and why or why not?
I totally agree. For the future, we don't even know what kinds of jobs are going to be out there, what technology is going to look like, how the world's going to change. It's changing so fast. So we definitely can't be stuck in the past. So we need to model that for our kids, and we need to definitely prepare them for that. Otherwise, we're just doing them a disservice.
I think as long as we get them ready for the basic skills, which is like those 4 C's: how to communicate, how to be critical thinkers, how to problem solve. So when they don't figure something out, what are the steps to figure something out? So we're getting them ready, regardless of what the job is going to be. They have the skills to be overcomers of that.
We're teaching that flexible thinking. So what are you going to do now when you don't know what to do? So, and that's where in the past they just get stuck. Like, I don't know what to do, I quit. So.
And that collaboration piece that we're teaching, I think it's something that I lacked. I always felt like I was kind of an island, especially in teaching, because you're in a room. So now we're moving into this talking constantly, and I'm growing and learning so much, and I think that's what we have to do as teachers.
And we talk about 21st century jobs and learners, as Nancy said earlier, that they're going to be working in places that are not yet created. So we have to teach them to create and to critically think and to communicate. And very few people have jobs that are in isolation. And so that collaboration piece is huge. And it's a shift from where our parents were trained or taught in students and where we're taking our kids. And it's a challenge, but it's an important one. It's one we must do.
What do you think about dynamic learning at Northside? We'll be having a follow-up EdChat with educators and administrators around the district on December 3rd, 2019. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at NISD EdChat or using hashtag NISD EdChat for more information. That's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube for more updates and more episodes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.